Hi there, I'm Gary Hoey, and I'm here to talk to you about GHS strings today. I've been using GHS strings since I was a kid. I've been using boomers, and they have stuck with me through all the years that I've been playing guitar. And I'll tell you, I've tried many different guitar strings, and the boomers are definitely the ones for me. And I want to take a minute today to talk to you about GHS and about the company and about some of the things that you probably didn't know. The company's been around since 1964, and in my opinion, they are the string expert. Nobody knows about strings like GHS strings. They have so many different brands and types that they use for every fretted instrument you could imagine that are being made in countries I can't even pronounce. And one thing I've found is a lot of guys get stuck using one set of strings, and that's all they use. They find one gauge. I actually use several different gauges on my different guitars depending on the situation I'm playing in. And the one thing about boomers is I find you can use them for any kind of music, whether you're playing blues, whether you're playing rock, whether you're playing heavy metal, they're going to do the job for you. And I'll give you a couple examples. In my career, I've gone through experiences where I've been in a studio recording a session and maybe, had to rent out an instrument for the day because I was out of town and they brought in a telly for me to play. And I've always said, okay, we got to put my strings on it. And I've had people actually say to me, come on, man, it's just a guitar, plug it in and play. And I'm like, no, I got to put my boomers on there because that's my sound. And I've actually changed the strings in 10 minutes, been up playing, and then the engineer would, hit the mic button and say, hey, what did you do to your amp? And I'd say nothing. He says, well, the meter's moving 3 dB higher than it was before you changed your strings, and your tone sounds a lot thicker. And the proof was in the pudding right there. People heard the difference as soon as I changed the strings. So one thing you got to think about with strings is that you can go out and buy a great amp, you can buy a great effect pedal, you can buy a great guitar, but so much of the tone comes from your hands. When you're playing the guitar, so much of the sound actually comes out of your hands. And a lot of my heroes that I've met over the years, I've always said to them, how do you get your sound? And they say, well, it's all in your hands, it's all in your hands. I heard that for years and never really understood what it meant. Your fingers, basically, the first thing they touch is the strings. Okay, that's the first connection to your sound, is your fingers touching the strings. If you don't have the proper strings under your fingers, you're not going to get the sound that you're looking for or the sound that you're hearing in your head. And the thing I love about boomers and GHS is that when you play the string, if you hit the note, even if you're playing like a blues kind of thing, it actually responds to how you hit it. And that's what I mean by the tone coming from your hands. When you strike a note on the guitar, if you hit it soft, the string should respond that way. When you hit it hard, the string should come alive. And that's exactly what boomers do. I've also tried a lot of other ones, like the nickel rockers. I've also tried the zero boomers, which are cryogenically treated in liquid nitrogen. I mean, what company goes to the depths of actually freezing their strings? I'm actually thinking about taking a set of those and stick them in my time capsule, so maybe 10,000 years from now, there'll still be a fresh set of strings for somebody. I also play acoustic guitar, and I use the phosphor bronze strings on all my acoustic guitars. And I've also been a guitar teacher for many years. When I was growing up teaching guitar, try to avoid a day job, I'd have students come to my house for guitar lessons, and I'd watch these kids just struggling, trying to play the blues, and I'd say, man, why are you having such a hard time? It looks like you can't even bend the string. Well, I'm using, 13 gauge strings because Stevie Ray Vaughan used 13 gauge. And I'd tell them, why don't you try a lighter gauge? Maybe you'll get a better feel for what you're doing. And I've had my students lighten up to a 9 gauge, and all of a sudden they're playing blues like they never played before. And they come to me and thank me. They say, man, I'm so glad you told me to try a different set of strings. Because the truth is, everybody's made up of a different anatomy. We all have a different hand strength, hand sizes, and you have to find what works for you. And with GHS, go out and buy 5 different sets of strings. Like myself, I'll actually use like the TNT boomers, which are a 10 through 52, so it's got a heavy bass string. I'll use that on my guitars where I do drop D tuning. So if I get the heavier sound, the bass string's not going to flap around. I also do things, if I'm getting ready for a tour, I'll actually put a heavier set of strings on my guitar for a couple of weeks before the tour starts so that I can kind of be in training right before the tour. So I'll be playing with a heavier gauge string, and it gets my hands a little more, where I got to work a little harder, and then a couple of days before the tour, I'll actually go down to a lighter gauge, and then all of a sudden I feel like someone just took weights off my fingers. So get that concept in your mind that you got to try some different strings out, They have strings that are made of different materials. You know, the earlier strings were the nickel rockers, which Eric Johnson, a friend of mine, uses. And his strings, if you play them, they have kind of a smoother edge to the metal. So you got to kind of find what works for you. Don't be afraid to experiment with the sound. Because if you're doing something that's going to have a rock tone, then you want a string that's going to give you that squeal, where you're going to actually hit the harmonic and the harmonic's going to come out. And if you're playing a blues sound and you're doing something with a walking bass line, where you want that, you know, you want your string to hold and keep its consistency. And consistency is another thing that I've discovered with GHS strings. They are so consistent in terms of playability, durability, strength, and tone, and they never, I mean, I've opened strings that I've had in my garage for months and months and months, and they still fresh, they still play great. And I've had other companies where I've picked up an old set of strings, I put them on, and they start to break. You know, knock on wood, I haven't broken a string on stage. I can't remember the last time I broke a string on stage. But what you need to do is make sure you find what's working for you and for your guitar. If you have a guitar that's an old guitar, if you have a Strat, if you have a Gibson Les Paul, you find different guitars have different scale lengths. These can also affect the way your guitar is going to respond. So don't be afraid to experiment with the different strings that you use. Find what's going to work for you, because I have definitely been experimenting over the years and found what's worked for me. So if you're out there and you haven't tried some GHS boomers lately, you got to go out and put them on your guitar, because I guarantee when you see the tone difference you're going to get, the center of the string actually has a thicker core. And that's something I discovered. When I started using boomers, I said, man, why is my guitar sound bigger when I'm using the same exact gauge that I used on another brand? It's because the core of the string is a thicker core. It's going to give you a stronger tone, and you're not going to be breaking strings if you are breaking strings. So definitely go out today and try out a set of GHS boomers. Tell them Gary Hoey sent you. All right.